Once a month, when the moon reaches its highest point in the sky and the wild creatures call out to the night, he emerges from a private sanctuary in an undisclosed location outside of Little Rock, Arkansas. Arrayed in his priestly vestments, carrying forth the good news that comic books and graphic novels aren't just for kids, that they aren't just mass and spandex superheroes, that storytelling in a graphic format can be so much more. He is the graphic novel apostle.
Hello and welcome back to the Graphic Novel Apostle podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ohrenberger. So happy to be back here with you this Monday morning. We've got my friend Michael Crump here with me. This is going to be a full episode. We are going to talk about the book Trve Kvlt, and that is Trve Kvlt. And I will tell you, that was something I had to get past. It was a bit of a barrier to entry for me on this book, but it's such a good book. And let me just run down the credits, and I'll bring Crump in for just a moment here. So this book was written by Scott Bryan Wilson. Art was done by Liana Kangas, who is, by the way, we're just outside of Little Rock, just about 120 miles up the road in Memphis. Liana's a Memphis-based artist. Colors on this book were done by Gab Contraras. Letters by D.C. Hopkins, and it was published by IDW Publishing through their IDW Originals line. A lot of people, when they think of IDW, think of different licensed properties, which is really sort of their bread and butter, but every now and then they'll put out one of these Originals books, and it looks like they're getting ready to kick into a bunch more of that. But this one was from 2022. It was a 5-issue miniseries that started in August of 2022 and ran through December of that year. And the collected edition that we'll be looking at today really is not going to be much different from the original, except that there'll be some additional material that's included in the package. Came out in the summer of 2023. There was an earlier version of this book that was done originally through Kickstarter, and really not that much different in time from when IDW picked up the book and they launched it that way as well. I've not ever seen a copy of that Kickstarter version, but I have read through this one a couple of times, and I am so excited about it. In just a second, I'll read the synopsis for this book. But first, Crump, man, what did you think of this?
Yeah, this was really great. I didn't know what to expect looking at the cover, the color scheme, and what you told me a little bit, just the little bit you said about the book. Mm-hmm. I really didn't know what to expect. So I'm sure we'll get into that more, but it was really fun to read.
Crump, so often, I tell people that, I picked this book for you for this very specific reason to my friends. And, this is about a burger restaurant that leads us into a Satan cult. And so I wasn't trying to send you a message with this book of what I think of you or anything like that.
Sure.
But it was a book that I had read, I guess, a year ago. And man, there were times where I sat like a lunatic and just laughed out loud at some of the dialogue in this book. And, I'll say to the listener out there that this book, on all these podcasts, we go through the full story. And this is your spoiler warning right now. We're going to talk about really probably every bit of the story. You could hear this podcast and then go back and enjoy the book 10 times more than what you're going to hear from just talking about the plot, because especially Scott Bryan Wilson's dialogue in this book.
Yeah, there are parts of this. I didn't write the notes out, but there were several times where I just had to kind of stop and go, okay, that was really funny. You could just picture in your mind how this would play out if this was, in a movie or whatever. And I had to stop and think about it for a minute, how funny it was.
Yeah, so the plot of this book is absurdist, but the characters are also absurdist, I guess. But they're so, once they sort of define the character, you are in that character, and
that's funny you said that. I actually took one of the notes I wrote was, it took me a little while to, once you kind of get to know the characters, like the first part of it, I'm making my way through it, and maybe it's just because I was reading it at night, but then as I got to know the characters, like as I was finishing the last half of it, it just flew by once I kind of established who everybody was and what was going on. It was so easy after that.
Yeah. And I can't wait to introduce those of you out there in the audience to some of these characters in a few minutes. Well, let me just read the synopsis that shows up on the back of the book. So this is how the publisher has summarized what you're going to get into now. It says, Marty is stuck at his dead-end job at Burger Lord, and the last 15 years have passed him by. What happens when he accidentally steals a supernatural weapon from an insane cult, full of violent lunatics, led by a monster in human form? Will his manager and his best friend Bernice roll her eyes and fire him? Will hopeful employee Allison get roped into Marty's unholy troubles? Will cashier Sonia just make out with her boyfriend Ratblood in the parking lot and miss all the excitement? Grab your extra-large soda and bite into the deliciously horrifying, hilarious world of Trve Kvlt. So there it is. Now, one of the things that really kind of made this book perfect for you, even though it was not a book that, I was like, man, Crump's my buddy, I got to have on the show. And, you and I talked about doing like historical fiction or war type books. And man, we'll have you back and we'll do one of those. But I didn't want to wait any longer to get to Trve Kvlt, and I didn't want to wait any longer to get to you. So
no, that's fine.
Let's do this. But one of the great things that turned out to be a really fun coincidence is the setting of this book. Book is set in a city called Jonesboro. And as I mentioned, the artist being from Memphis a few moments ago, hard to imagine that's anything but our beloved Jonesboro. So Crump, you're from Eastern Arkansas originally.
Yeah, correct. I grew up actually Memphis was more of our go-to. I grew up in Lee County. It's very Eastern Arkansas, very Delta. But Memphis was, growing up, instead of Little Rock, which, a lot of people in Arkansas kind of gravitate towards, Memphis was our go-to. That's the news that we got was from Memphis. The television shows we watch, our newspaper, everything. We'd go to Memphis on the weekends. I never came to Little Rock. But Memphis was definitely growing up our go-to. And then, of course, going to college in Jonesboro. You're right. When I got to the end and the name of the town was revealed, I was like, wait a minute.
Well, and there's one place earlier on where you get a glimpse of this. Mm-hmm. I think it's on maybe the application that Allison is filling out or something like that. There's on one of the forms, you see about 2/3 of the word Jonesboro written. And so for our listeners, because we do have some listeners from all around the world. By the way, we've got someone from the Bavaria region of Germany who faithfully listens to every episode of this show. I would love to know you. Please send me an email, graphicnovelapostle@gmail.com, and hit me up. I'd love to connect. But so for the people who may not be quite as familiar, Jonesboro, Arkansas, in northeast Arkansas, is the home to Arkansas State University, your alma mater.
Yes.
And Crump, you went to college there for 7 years?
A lot of years. Started in 89, dropped out for a few years. And actually that's, some of that kind of ties into how I related to Marty in this, but dropped out for a few years, came back, and then finished up in December of 97. So,
okay.
I guess is it Tommy Boy says a lot of people go to school for 8 years, they're called doctors, but no, about almost 8 years to get my undergrad.
Hey, so, that's all right, man.
Yeah.
And it has served you well all these years. And I know that you are a loyal and faithful Arkansas State University athletics fan. So I love that whenever we get to see each other up at the games and stuff like that together. And by the way, the basketball team's going to be awesome this year.
Thank goodness. Yeah.
We got to make some trips together.
Yeah, I'm going to do all I can to get down this week, even though work's busy. Might have to make one of those work night trips.
Oh, you're going to go see them play Little Rock?
I'm thinking about it. I might even see if Nancy will drive, because I can't really drive at night. I don't know if I told you or not, but I'm getting my first ever pair of big boy glasses in about a week and a half. So it had only been since the 1980s since I'd been to the eye doctor. And I'm trying to avoid driving at night until I get those glasses.
Oh, wow. I forget those are readers that you you
readers for about 10 years. These are your Dollar General specials right here.
Sure. So. And, Crump, a lot of the stuff that you and I have done together over the years outside of work-based interactions have been, going to concerts and stuff like that together. And, you're about 10 years older than I am, which we were talking about just before we started. I always forget that. That doesn't feel right that you're that much older than me. But
thank you. I think.
But I'll tell you though, I had a moment in this last year where middle age really set in on me in a very hard way, and that was when we were over at the hall watching the Gin Blossoms touring the 30th anniversary of the new Miserable Experience album, and so that made me feel some kind of way. But we're standing there in the crowd, and we watch the opening act, and the lights come up, and we're going to, get to the main act in a few minutes. And you pull out your phone to start, looking at your your Facebook or something, and then you pull out your readers and put them on to look at the phone. I was like, oh no, we are old, Crump.
I just knew you were going to the fact that if you go stand at a venue like that for 3 to 4 hours, you don't realize, well, there's two things. Number one, you start looking for the restroom. You realize maybe I should position myself closer to the restroom than in the middle of the crowd. But then that trip back to the car, and when you go, that's when it really hits you. You go to get in your car and your body just says, oh my God, what have you been doing for the last 3 or 4 hours, which is just standing. But you're right. You realize I can't stand up for 3 or 4 hours anymore.
Oh my goodness gracious. Well, so there's a good music tie-in here as well. You know, the spelling and the name of the book is unusual. And I heard an interview when this book was getting ready to come out back in the summer of 2022. It was an interview they did on the podcast Comic Book Club, and Scott Bryan Wilson and Liana Kangas were both on there. And Wilson talked about the title of this book, and he said it's actually borrowed from black metal, where apparently within that community, when somebody wants to act like they're all into just the most underground black metal, to kind of send them up a little bit, they're like, oh, you're into Trve Kvlt, you know? And then he said, though, that like from there, the industry kind of adopted it, and a lot of like black metal labels or whatever will put out the Trve Kvlt version of, you know, some band's record, and it will be spelled that way, Trvekvlt.
I had not heard that, but I could absolutely see this on the back of someone's Trapper Keeper, you know, where they've scribbled their Pantera, Trve Kvlt, whatever might be on the back. Yeah,
for sure. And, you know, I'll tell you, when this book was coming out in individual issues, I would hear it being reviewed on different podcasts that I follow, and I'd think it sounds like such a cool book, but I can't get past the V's instead of the U's. It was the same thing with that band Churches for the longest time.
Yeah.
I was just like, every time I'd see it written someplace, I'd be like, I'm not listening. I probably would really like them, but I'm not listening. But I finally overcame it with this one, and you and I did a little project in the last couple of months where we're going to talk some music for just a few minutes here. Now, Marty, our lead character here, we know he's into Winger and
Lita Ford,
Queensryche.
Yeah.
Queensryche.
I picked up on all of those things. Yeah.
I loved the Queensryche reference.
Yeah.
Who, by the way, you know, they're getting ready to come play at the hall.
I think almost everyone is touring right now. Yeah,
it seems like it. But, you know, I picked up on this from my buddy Jonathan Warren, who we'll have on the podcast eventually. He had sent me a Spotify playlist one day called 45 from 15. And the idea was he had picked his 15 favorite albums, not favorite songs, not favorite bands, 15 favorite front-to-back albums, and took 3 tracks from each and put them on a playlist. And he had some metal on there. And I decided I wanted to copy that idea. And so I started doing it, and I couldn't stop at 15. There was no way I could do 15 records. So I made 40 from 20. So I put down 20 records, put up my playlist, and I know you jumped on that and you saw some stuff you liked, and then you went ahead and made your own. So Crump, we've got to spend some time going through our 40 for 20 playlists and talking about every record on each of those. Now, I know that's going to be pretty long to go through, and so we don't bog ourselves down on this episode, what we'll do is I'm going to cut out that audio, and it will be released as a separate episode. So friends, if you care about what Crump and I are listening to, or just like talking music, you'll get about an hour of me and Crump just talking music. So that'll be our next episode that releases. I guess we'll do that next week. Now let's get back in and talk about Trve Kvlt.
Let's do it.
So this book opens with our main character, Marty, doing sort of a voiceover. He's talking to us, the audience, and he's talking about these very mundane things, which it took me a while. I was like, I know I've seen this sort of like technique from a movie before, where I could sort of like, I don't know, the voice, I think because he was so particular about the ins and outs of working at Burger Lord, this fictitious burger joint that he's at. And it hit me. Christian Bale's character in American Psycho does this, where he's like, I mean, this is not the exact quote from the movie or anything, but where he starts talking at the beginning of that movie of like, I get up every morning and I use this facial wash and this exfoliating cream, and then I do 200 sit-ups, and
it's almost Ferris Bueller-like too,
Yeah, a little bit, right?
That inner monologue, but you can't,
inner monologue, but it's also addressed to us, the listener. Yeah, Ferris Bueller's a good call, and that runs throughout this book quite a bit. So what we learn is that Marty's got this pent-up frustration with the realization that he's been working in the same job for 15 years, going all the way back to when he was in high school, and and going to pick up tapes on every Tuesday when the new tapes came out. And he got this job, but he's decided that today is the day. This is a good day for us to meet him in the comic, because today is the day that everything changes for him. He's put together a master plan that he has worked on for months, and he's going to clock out of the Burger Lord for his 30-minute lunch break, and he's going to put that plan into action and then clock back in. So issue 1 of this book is all about the heist. And, it does have a little bit of that Ocean's 11 kind of feel in how the heist is plotted, with none of the Ocean's 11 sophistication for how his heist is carried off.
Or large amounts of money either.
That's right. So the Burger Lord restaurant, which, by the way, let's talk for just a minute about Burger Lord. This restaurant it's got this logo that's sort of like the traditional, image of God with the big white fluffy beard. And then like their drinks are called Holy Cola. Oh, what are some of the others?
I think there's reference to the Trinity in one of the meals. Yeah.
Right. There's the loaves and fishes meals. Their Happy Meal thing is like the little Jesus,
fantastic.
Happy Meal, and the gift inside is eternal life. So you've got this overtly Christian, religious themed burger joint.
Yes.
Which is just like every other burger joint. And by the way, you mentioned to me this week that you read the first episode of this, the first issue of this podcast, and then you turned it off. And that evening, you and Nancy happened to be watching a documentary about the Burger Chef.
One of those murder shows that, when you're sitting around with your wife and you can't think of anything to watch, and you're like, here's a murder show. So you're watching this documentary. It's just, they're either on in the background. Sometimes they suck you in. But yeah, Burger Chef, it was about these 4 young men and women that were murdered in the 1970s at a Burger Chef in Indiana, which I asked you at the time. I told you the colors at the beginning of this first issue, very orange, red, yellow, and that was the exact same color scheme that Burger Chef. And I actually remembered Burger Chef. There was one in Pine Bluff when I lived there a little bit. It rivaled McDonald's. I had to go back in and look. They had as many franchises as McDonald's for a period in the early 70s.
And that blows my mind because, it hung around. Burger Chef still existed until like 96 when Hardee's bought it. And if I ever heard of it in my whole life, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
And by the way, I actually watched that documentary
as
well. I think it's called Murder at the Burger Joint.
Maybe.
I think is the name of it. And it's playing right now on HBO Max.
Okay. I think I caught it on Hulu or something like that.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe this was a different documentary.
It's possible. I mean, it's an unsolved murder from the 70s at a burger joint. But yeah, as soon as I opened this up, that's just such a great coincidence and it brought back all these memories of Burger Chef. I mean, it was fantastic.
Well, what was funny to me as well was that you texted me that morning and were asking about Burger Chef. And I was like, no, I never heard of it. I think you're making this up. And then a few hours later, I saw you'd made a post on Facebook where you were like, "Does anybody remember Burger Chef?"
Sometimes I think, what's the phrase? What's that situation where you remember something that didn't really happen?
The Nelson Mandela syndrome.
Yes, the Mandela effect, or
the Nelson Mandela effect.
Yeah, where it's like, wait a minute, I know there was a Burger Chef restaurant. This isn't like just my imagination. I mean, here it's in the show.
Yeah,
but yeah, luckily there were a few people, probably a little bit older than myself, that remembered, and a few even said they had worked there way back when. But pretty stronghold, yeah.
Well, how about that? Well, this is not the Burger Chef; it's the Burger Lord.
Burger Lord,
and the Burger Lord corporate speak is going to be a big part of this book when we meet our friend Allison in a few minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And the Burger Lord protocols and that kind of thing. But I guess let's talk about this heist first. So Marty, who, by the way, there's a point later in the book where Bernice, who is the manager and his best friend, they've worked together the whole time that Marty has been at Burger Lord. Bernice is describing Marty to another character and trying to make sure they were talking about the same person. And she's like, mustache, looks like he was born with a
mullet.
That's really, really right. So, anyway, this Burger Lord restaurant is across the parking lot from a strip mall, one that is sort of like two strip mall buildings that come to a right angle, in the shape of an L. And actually, one of the images that we'll put on the Instagram feed later on, at Graphic Novel Apostle, is a map of the parking lot and all the different stores. But his big plan is that during his 30-minute lunch break, he is going to rob all 8 stores in this strip mall consecutively, and then put his Burger Lord shirt back on and go back to work. And so he'll have, deniability, I suppose. So I laughed so hard when he's going through these different stores. So the first up is a cell phone store. He gets $20 and a charger for his Flip 6 phone because the guy at the store is like, dude, nobody buys a cell phone with cash. So next, he gets a big score here. He goes into a nail salon. He gets $469, and the woman that works there in the salon calls him a butthole, which he gets all offended by. He's like, that's the worst thing you can call somebody. Oh, and by the way, so he's taken off his Burger Lord shirt, and he's put on like a plastic Halloween type mask over his face that's got one of those elastic strings
like
just kind of holding it in place.
Like the masks Walmart you'd buy in like the 80s.
That's right.
Cheap.
And he also has a gun. And we learned that sometime back a couple of years ago, he was sweeping the parking lot, trying to make everything look nice, and he came across a bag that had a gun in it.
Yeah.
And so he's been holding this gun all these years just for this time. So he's got his $469. He goes next door to a comic book store where he gets $83. And then he asks the clerk, like, hey, are any of these comics worth anything in here? And the guy just goes, no. And so, by the way, Crump, you are not a regular comics reader, but you were earlier in your life.
I was. I brought you that box today. I had to go dig it out of the top of my closet. It's covered in dust, but yeah, I did. I read comics in the early 80s when I was a kid, and I'll let you go through them, but they were all war comics, Sergeant Rock, GI Combat. I love that stuff, but I kind of put those aside and hadn't really. In fact, I might go back home and look through them when I get. I know they're not worth anything because I didn't take care of them, and they're probably not popular enough to be worth anything. But yeah, I did. I loved comics for very many years early on.
Yeah, it is one of those heartbreaking things, though, when you realize, like, this box that I've kept because I thought for sure it'd be worth some money is worth the nostalgia that you assign to it.
I found several boxes up there as well of baseball, football, and basketball cards, and I have some from the early 70s all the way, because I was really big into those in the 90s, and it was kind of the rage in the 90s was collecting baseball cards and other sports, and ever since then, whatever market was there has just gone, it just bottomed out. But yeah, I thought my kids would be able to, I'd be leaving those to my kids and they would be so wealthy from all these cards that I was buying. Not so much.
So Crump, I spend a lot of money on comic books, and I have to, once every few days, I have to tell myself, this is not an investment strategy. Just because there was a new character that was introduced in this issue does not mean this is going to rocket in value or even necessarily hold its cover price value. Right. Some do, and some get hot if the character is going to be in a movie and you have the first appearance of that.
Now, I think mine were only about 75 cents when they came out, so they might actually still be worth 75 cents.
If they were in better condition, I would say you could probably fetch $1 each for them.
Yeah.
But you can enjoy them when you get them today.
Absolutely.
All right, so we leave the comic book shop. We go on to robbery number 4, a mattress store. Nets $0.
You know what? I got to stop you here.
Yeah.
When I got to that part, so maybe I don't know if this is a generational, sort of myth, but my girls, since they were very young, have always, anytime we pass a Mattress King, they say that's a front for the Russian mafia. Apparently all the kids say that nobody ever goes in there, that's just some kind of front. And so when I read that, I was like, oh my God, I guess maybe that's where he pulled this from. But I'm like, nobody ever goes in a mattress store. And again, to your point, nobody would be paying cash for mattresses either. So
that's right.
Not well thought out.
The salesman. And by the way, listeners, there are so many jokes laced throughout this book, even if we give a couple of them away here while we're talking. Trust me, this is going to be worth your time to read the book, and it's going to have so many more. But the clerk there in the mattress store was like, "I've been working here a week, and you're the first person who's come in." And then he says to him, "Yesterday, I was in the store with my shirt off for an hour just to see if I could do it." So he leaves there with $0. He goes next door to a head shop where he gets $322 and talks to this hippie who's like, "Please just leave, dude." So then he goes, robbery number 6, into a fireplace supply store. It's the middle of the summer, and the woman who's working there is like thrilled that he has come in. She has $8 that she turns over to him, and she's like, "It's a fireplace supply store in the middle of the summer. I'm so happy you're like," she's like, "This is the most exciting thing that's happened all week." Oh man. So robbery number 7, he goes to a GameStop type store. It's like a used video game store. He gets $514. And then the last stop in this strip mall is a video game arcade where he gets $622.75 in quarters.
Yeah.
And there's this panel of him holding this bag open with, whatever dollar bill cash is in the bottom, and this woman just dumping a bucket of quarters into
He's
the
like,
bag.
"You dropped some of those sweet quarters. Pick those up."
Yeah, that's right. And then maybe this is where everything goes wrong. When you develop the perfect plan for a robbery, stick to the plan. You can't just go hot dogging.
Maybe that's the lesson of the whole
because
thing.
I think so. That may be the moral of this story.
Yes.
So we have a surprise 9th robbery, and this is a crime of opportunity. But there is a delivery truck driver who's sitting out in the parking lot, and I guess Marty's just feeling so good right now about this crime and how smoothly that nobody freaked out that he pointed a gun at them or anything. So he goes to the driver of this truck and he's like, "Give me whatever you got in the truck." And the driver's like, "I don't even know what's in this truck, but I've got this one package here," and hands him the package. And so he's like, "All right, whatever, I'll take it," And he goes back to his car, parked elsewhere in the parking lot, and he dumps all of his ill-gotten gain now, all the pirate booty, I guess you could call it, into the trunk of his car, dumps his gun in there, and he's got to go clock back into work. He's got 6 minutes left. So the total haul, he got $2,038.75 in cash, a charger cord for a flip phone 6, and this one package that he tears open, and we see, and I think if you didn't already know this, you might not have realized this is exactly what it was, because you just kind of see part of it. But it's this all-black vinyl record that is going to come into play in just a minute here. So Marty, who's sometimes referred to as Tarantula, his last name is Tarantelli or something like that, man, he is feeling so good about what he has just done. He goes back to Burger Lord, clocks back in, and he's ready to just go on with his day, knowing that he is twice the man that he was when he woke up that morning. So the rest of this issue 1, and probably this will be the longest issue that we spend going through, just because it's a very dense issue, but the rest of this issue is mostly an introduction to this cast of characters. And I suppose the setting for most of the rest of this issue is going to be back in the Burger Lord in a booth where Marty, as the assistant manager who's working that day, is going to be interviewing an applicant who's come in named Allison. But let's start first by talking about Bernice a little bit. So Bernice is Marty's boss and his best friend. Through a lot of this book, as the plot moves forward, she is not going to be present in the main A plot. She's going to have her own B plot. But throughout so much of this book as it goes on, Bernice is going to come to realize just how affectionate she feels toward Marty. And I don't mean in a romantic way.
No, I actually wrote a note down. There's one panel where she kind of realizes that, where she sees him, and you could tell it's from several years earlier. He's like, "I've got these tickets. You want to go to this show?" She's in the hospital for something. There's the card. I mean, you could tell that just like these people you meet at work sort of become like family. And I over that time, she kind of realized, like you said, not in a romantic way, but that she probably didn't even realize how close she had grown to Marty throughout this whole time she'd been working with him.
Right. And when you think about their day-to-day experience, Marty is probably somebody who brings a lot of frustrations along with his messing up the bun order,
right?
Or whatever, having his own ideas about how things ought to be done at the Burger Lord. But she knows at the end of the day, he's got her back, she's got his, and they really do love each other. And it's a really sweet friendship. Well, in comes Allison. So she's a stranger to both of them. Allison is applying to work at the Burger Lord. She has previously worked at another Burger Lord location. And in fact, she wears her Burger Lord shirt from her old job. And she loves the Burger Lord.
She absolutely does.
This woman's greatest aspiration in life is to just move up the chain through the Burger Lord franchise because she has bought in. And so much of her dialogue, which there's no way we'll be able to communicate this really fully effectively on a podcast without just like reading long clips of her dialogue. But she speaks in this like Burger Lord corporate management speak. And she's constantly talking about like the proper way to clean out the grease traps.
Yes.
And how they're not flipping burgers. All their burgers are on a timer so that they're perfect every time.
With her, I mean, it's interesting when you talk about Allison, because that character, I mean, I immediately would just start thinking of so many people I've worked with or known. She has at first I'm thinking she has OCD. There's some kind of, she has a condition. Mm-hmm. And she craves, you mentioned the corporate, the order, the process, like she loves this job. And you can kind of see pretty quickly why maybe she was let go from her previous Burger Lord position, but she just loves this stuff. I mean, everything about it. I mean, she has a passion for this kind of work, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, it really was.
Just that, somebody, I mean, your purpose or your passion can be in any kind of work, just whatever makes you happy. But she can talk.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've ever, if you've worked with, and I hate to say this about anyone in particular that might be listening, but especially people that work in like IT and finance, and maybe it's just because I have a different background, but sometimes when the IT and finance people start talking, they can go on and on and on about spreadsheets and things, and you're oh my God, I've got something I need to do. I mean, it's not unpleasant, but that's what Allison reminded me of. He's sitting there going through his thoughts. He's thinking about some things that you're about to talk about that are about to happen, and she doesn't let up. I mean,
right. She doesn't notice he's
just
distracted.
Background chatter, and she won't stop. So,
but what's funny too, though, is that Marty hasn't been here at Burger Lord for 15 years because he's incapable of doing anything else.
Right.
He might not have the motivation to go look for a different circumstance, but it also seems he genuinely likes doing this work too and takes some pride in it. And so it's sort of like lighting up some synapses for him in his brain when he starts hearing her talk about how she does the grease just right and she times the buns just right, or whatever.
Starts making him sort of appreciate what he's been doing for 15 years.
That's right, that he's been doing it the right way,
yeah.
and someone else has this same love.
Yeah.
And you mentioned her being let go from her other Burger Lord job, and I actually think it was that her family left town.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, I don't think she'd been let go. Now, there are several times throughout the book where she's trying to communicate, because she treats everything that will happen from here on out, she treats as part of an extended interview for the job, even though things go so wild. But she acts like, but in a way, she's like, I'm pretty sure I got the job.
Yeah.
But she's still, she's playing interview Allison. But she's always trying to sell that she also has these soft skills that don't show up well on paper. And they talk about, it's very apparent that her dad was a criminal. Mm-hmm. And so when she knows how to pick a lock or hotwire a car, and she talks about how like she would, dream about working at Burger Lord while she stayed in the car while her dad ran into a liquor store.
Yeah, right. Ran in and when it came back out real fast.
Yeah, that's right. So that's Allison, and we'll get to know her even better because as the plot moves forward, really Marty and Allison working together is kind of our pair through the main plot of the story. But then also Lonnie and Johnny, who are the twin brothers who are married to a set of twin women who are the owners of this franchise and several other Burger Lord franchises. Now, this is where you start getting a little bit of the like unusualness of what's going on at the Burger Lord, because Lonnie and Johnny are mean and foul. They're going to cuss their employees all the time. Like a person comes in asking for food because they don't have anything to eat or no place to stay, they're going to throw them out. everyone comes in to like put up a flyer. They're going to belittle them and all that, except for one group. A group called the Church of the Immortal Heartbeat are allowed to come in and proselytize to any of the customers and put up their flyers and whatever else. And it seems like Lonnie and Johnny are pretty keen to have those guys around.
Oh, yeah. And you mentioned the brothers marrying sisters. That was another thing. My wife has 6 aunts. There were 7 girls in her mom's family.
Okay.
2 of the sisters married 2 brothers. Now, they weren't twins.
Yeah.
But it was always kind of interesting to me and just odd. That's like, I mean, a small town, I guess maybe, slim pickings. You have to take what you got, right? But you had 2 sisters married 2 brothers. And so just the... uncle, I don't even know how all that works, this is the part when Lonnie and Johnny come in, I started getting kind of like Breaking Bad vibes.
Okay.
Right? That's kind of what I started getting, because I didn't know, the pink cover, but with the pentagram and everything on the front, and with Marty with his hold up or his robbery plan. I really didn't know. I didn't research to figure out what type of comic this was, like the direction it's eventually going to go. So I'm just trying to figure out what is this thing? And now I'm starting to get Breaking Bad vibes when Lonnie and Johnny come into the picture.
Oh, that's fun. That's fun. I hadn't thought about that. Well, so much of this introduction we've gotten to these characters is during the course of Allison's interview. And you mentioned a second ago that Marty is distracted through a lot of it, and Allison doesn't seem to notice. But he's distracted because, you can imagine, like, this guy's heart rate must just be, like, through the roof still. And then, while that is going on, a police car pulls up outside. And these 2 cops come in, and they start talking to Bernice. And eventually... they make their way over to the table where Allison and Marty are, and one of the cops says, well, every witness that we interviewed said that the suspect smelled like burgers, or like pickles and onions.
Yeah.
So we knew to come over here and figured at least maybe a customer or somebody, you might have seen something. This is the right
place to start. You could just see him stumbling, like how obvious, what a bad witness he would be as Marty's trying to go, well, it could be this other restaurant. They had pickles and onions there. Well, the taco place, they don't really have pickles and onions. I mean, he's trying to pass it off like, I'm just being helpful to you guys. But inside, he's got to throw these guys off.
Yeah, he's not exactly being cool. But the police officers apparently don't notice this. And Bernice takes them and they go to like the back office and they're going to talk some more and get a statement from Bernice. And meanwhile, someone else comes in and interrupts them. And you just see like on a word balloon at the last panel of one of the pages. And it says, who'd like to hear some news today? And then you turn to the last page of the issue. And then we've got our moment of surprise that's going to set up where we go into issue 2.
Maybe this is ahead. Maybe I'm jumping ahead too far. But didn't Allison, when he's talking to the cops, Allison lied for him, right? Was that during this conversation? She lies and says, I saw the robber kiss the delivery driver, the person driving the truck, and then they drove off together.
She does. That's right. She
and
covers
just
for
on
him.
the spot. She says, yeah. And she said, well, they say, well, we talked to the truck driver, and that's not what they say happened. And she says, well, the truck driver's lying. You need to go talk to her again.
Good
so
point.
I'm like, wow, which I think, going back to what you said and her love and how this is all one big, she still thinks this is part of the interview.
Right.
And she starts saying, I could start. Would you let me start right now? I think she's just thinking, I'll help this guy out.
You'll have no choice but to hire me.
Yeah, I'm going to help him out and get out of this pickle. Well, no pun intended, but this pickle he's in.
That's right. So, good point. I'm glad you caught that. So then as we turn over to the last page of the issue, we have these 2 guys from the Church of the Immortal Heartbeat, and they're standing there. And I just took down this little bit of dialogue that leads us into the beginning of issue 2. So we end issue 1 with the guy from the Immortal Heartbeat Church saying, whether it's good news or bad news depends on you and what you have to say for yourself. At this moment, I know 3 things. 1, Satan is Lord, and Dr. Shiver is his unholy messenger. 2, I am not at my post outside spreading the good news right now because of you. And 3, you took something that belongs to us. Well, to Satan. You think he's going to let that slide?
Scene.
Yes, that's right. End scene. Well, and then we get into issue 2, And you still got Bernice in the back, distracted, talking to these police officers. She's actually kind of flirting up with one of the detectives. And meanwhile, these two guys from the Church of the Immortal Heartbeat have kidnapped Marty and Allison. They've taken them outside and just thrown them into the back of this van and put sacks over their heads and start driving off with them. So after she finishes up with the police, Bernice realizes that Marty's gone. And she goes out to his car in the parking lot and she finds that his trunk is popped open and there's a gun laying on the ground. Now, she doesn't know anything about this robbery, but she knows that he's in trouble. None of this is a good sign. And she decides that, hey, I could call this detective that I've just been, flirting with, but that probably is going to get my friend Marty in trouble. And so she's going to take it upon herself to go track him down and rescue him. And that really sets her off on her mission for the rest of the book. So meanwhile, poor Marty and Allison are being driven around in this van, and they get taken to this office where we meet a woman named Veronica. And Veronica apparently is the head of a faction within this Church of the Immortal Heartbeat. And what she wants and what her followers want is to kill Dr. Shiver, who is the cult leader figure of this satanic church. They say that he's 378 years old. And we also learn that members who join the Church of the Immortal Heartbeat sign these contracts binding themselves to serve Satan for 666,666 years before they get whatever reward is coming. And it seems that some of them, as they've gotten into the service, the newness and excitement of it wears off a little bit. And so Veronica's whole concept here is she needs to take out Dr. Shiver and install herself as the head of this Satan cult, because if she's going to be serving in it for several 100,000 years, she might as well have a comfortable place in the pecking order. Aside from the fact that Marty obviously has something that belongs to them, we heard that at the end of the last issue, and we're going to learn in just a second, it's this vinyl record that he had gotten from the delivery truck driver. Once again, he had gone off the plan, off script, and that was his big mistake. So aside from that belonging to the church and Veronica and her people regarding this as some sort of occult weapon that could be used to take out Dr. Shiver, they also see value in Marty because the Church of the Immortal Heartbeat guys had watched him conduct these 8-9 robberies in a row. And so they think that he's some sort of master criminal, which is great. They see the guy get $2,000 from 30 felonies.
They see his potential.
They see his potential. That's exactly right. Unwinding this plot is really all of what we get in issue 2. And that is Veronica promises Marty and Allison that she will let them go if they pull off this mission that she's going to send them on. And as we go into issue 3, we learn that that mission is to go to the headquarters of the Church of the Immortal Heartbeat, which she says is the tallest building in, 1,000 miles or whatever. Yeah. And it's a 1-story building, but it goes down
66.
Well, at least 66.
At least 66
because
floors.
We know that Dr. Shiver's residence is on the 66th floor underground. And so they have to get into this compound, go down 66 floors underground, kill Dr. Shiver with this occult weapon, which, as far as they can tell, is just a black vinyl record, and then escape somehow. And if they get through all that, they can go back to Burger Lord and their regular lives. While this is happening, Bernice tracks down Veronica. And, she really gets in Veronica's face and is this is my friend, and you are going to tell me where Marty is. And then eventually says, you are going to take me there yourself. And apparently there's some great distance between wherever this headquarters is for the church and this office where Veronica has her gang set up. But before Bernice and Veronica can head out toward the headquarters of the church, we know that Allison and Marty have already been stuck back in the van, and they are being driven by the original 2 thugs who had picked them up at the Burger Lord back out there to the church. And they get to the church, and so they have to use some amount of posing as if they are interested members to get their way past security to be able to get to where they can go 66 floors down.
Yeah, so this is something I noticed or thought of. You may have thought of it too, and my apologies because I'm sure that Tom Cruise and John Travolta both listen to this podcast. But
Probably.
I'm sure they do. But I got Scientology vibes here.
I did too.
They're describing this actualization, and I know I've heard or read there's like actually machinery that they use to measure your sort of, how deep you are devoted to Scientology, and they have that large. It goes up instead of down.
Okay.
But the Church of Scientology has this large, I think it's blue building skyscraper I've seen in some photos as well. So I was getting really strong Scientology vibes from this part with the whole actualization.
Yeah, right when they get in and they're... It's so funny. Allison says something when they come in like, I'm Allison, and this is Marty, my intimate partner, and also hopefully my future employer. And we'll have to clear that with HR. She goes through the whole corporate.
And they're like,
thing.
that's okay. We'll take care of that. We've got something you can give to HR.
That's right. They say we've got a form. That's right. But then they pair them off with members of the church, and they take them into separate rooms where they're going to go through this actualization introduction or orientation to the Church of the Immaculate Heart.
Which I think the way the two of them handle that, the actualization part, that it's supposed to be just a formality to get through the plan. As you go, I'll talk about it, but both those, it says a lot about each of their characters.
Well, talk about that. Yeah.
No, that's what so as Marty's going through this actualization, he's starting to actually sort of, it's kind of worry. He's kind of almost taking it seriously. He keeps having these visions, but instead of seeing all these like different opportunities and ways his life could go and how things could play out differently, and every single panel is basically he still works at Burger Lord. He's sitting there with the gun, and it never changes much. His hair might look a little more mullety or less of a mustache, but there's different things on the wall. But no matter how many times he's running through all these actualizations of his life, he's always at Burger Lord, right?
Yeah,
and it's like no matter, but he's looking for his purpose the whole time he's at Burger Lord. I feel like when they talk about his potential, like there's this whole big underlying thing with Marty where it's like he is made for something bigger, but he enjoys and he excels at this job at Burger Lord, and he cannot pull himself away from it.
That's right. So part of the actualization process is that they put this like machine over the person's eyes, and they, talk to them with some type of script that they go through, and they're supposed to be seeing in their mind's eye all these different versions of what their life could be. And they're supposed to just keep going through them until they get to the one that shows like what their special purpose is, that they're destined for greatness. And you just like you said, his are like exactly the same over
673. He's at Burger Lord.
Yeah.
But it is. But Allison apparently just quickly got through that because, she's so zoned in on the process at Burger Lord and this is what we do that she's not looking for like this, like Burger Lord is like the destination for her.
That's right. She's already actualized.
There is no other for her.
That's right. Well, and so what's great is the way Marty is finally interrupted from seeing versions of his life that are exactly the same, change the decorations in his apartment basically over and over again, is Allison comes into the room and hits his actualization coach over the head, which is another one of her soft skills.
Yeah.
She had used like karate.
Interview's going great.
To get herself out of her own coach's room. And so they're going to do that. Now they've got to, they start walking down these flights of stairs. And, it's funny. It's hard to convey this in an audio podcast like this, but there are like a couple of pages that follow of just like 4 or 5 vertical panels of Marty and Allison walking down flights of stairs together, which sounds like it could be boring to watch, except that Allison is just talking the whole time. And she's talking about Burger Lord and doing the orders and the fries and, whatever else. And it's so funny.
Mm-hmm. All I could think about, though, is I only have 5 floors at my building, and I'm on the 5th floor. And walking down is not so bad. But that means you've got to walk back up 66 flights of stairs.
Oh,
and
dude, no way, right?
I don't do 5. At the most, I'll walk, from 3 to 5, but I'm not going up from 1 to 5. That is just, I'm taking the elevator. So, yeah, they got quite a task ahead of them going 66 flights.
They do. And so we move into issue 4, and the individual issues didn't have their own like issue title, but I sort of gave this one the subtitle, The Mission Unravels, because it's at least where things go astray from the plan. So they get down to the 66th floor, and they see that there are 2 guards outside of Dr. Shiver's private residence, and they've got to get past these guards. And of course, the way they managed to do it is they figured out by now that Burger Lord in this church and Johnny and Lonnie are all sort of tied in somehow. And on their way down, they'd gone by a floor where there was a meeting room or something, and they could smell the Burger Lord.
Yeah.
And so, in fact, they're talking about like what the individual orders are that they can smell. And they're like, well, that one has no cheese. And that one. So they go down there and they basically just act like they're also, they're still in their Burger Lord uniforms. And so they go in, they're like, hey, we're from Burger Lord. They sent us down from the 33rd floor. Like, you go back up and you can get some now. And, and the guards are like, they got the fries? They're like, all the holy cola you can drink?
Yeah.
And so the guards just leave and they're able to go in, which is hilarious. So once they get past these guards, though, they go in and there's just this old man sitting in a chair. And it's a chair that looks like kind of a throne, devil throne type chair, not too ornate. And he doesn't look like he's like 380 years old. He just looks like an old dude.
Yeah.
And Marty whips that record out and like holds it in front of him like he's wielding it. And he just yells, "Be gone, beast." And nothing happens. And Dr. Shiver is like, "Veronica sent you, didn't she?"
Yeah.
And so Dr. Shiver is like, yeah, Veronica and this whole sect of the church think that they're going to break away, and they think that this record album is some kind of occult weapon that will allow them to kill me. And that's not what this thing is at all. And then he says, like, they've built up this true cult around this record, so we kind of tie that idea back in. And he takes it from them, and he starts talking about, like, this is a vinyl record just like any other. He starts talking about like Seals and Crofts. Yeah. He's like, you might put that on when you go to bed at night.
Seals and Crofts? What?
Yeah. But we see, though, that as he's holding this record, it starts to like goop. It starts to like melt and fall off onto the floor. And he's explaining that this record he had used to, I don't know, like take the spirit of Satan and encapsulate it in this record so that it could be released into our world. It was part of his strategy or something. But I don't know if it fell into the wrong hands. We never get the whole backstory. But for some long period of time, apparently Satan had been trapped inside this record. And so once that record melts onto the floor, all of a sudden this giant being appears there in the room with them. And it's got the torso of a man, the lower half, the legs and hooves of like a goat.
Gotta have the hooves.
And then where the head is, I guess that's like a goat head or a ram head or something like that, but it's just the skull and the horns. And so Dr. Shiver starts talking to Satan, and he's praising him and worshiping him, and he says something like, I'm so sorry I had to trap you in there for all this time. And this Satan figure is like, nobody traps me, and he sets Dr. Shiver on fire and kills him. And so Marty and Allison are like, oh no. So Marty, thinking fast, starts making this argument to Satan, saying like, you would still be in that record if it wasn't for me stealing it.
We did you a solid.
Yeah, so how about you just let us go? And Satan thinks about this for a few minutes and says, no, I'm still going to kill you, but I'll give you a 6-second head start. And he sits there for just a moment thinking about what to do, Marty does. And while he's trying to process like what to do, he's like, I'm not going to outrun the devil.
Yeah, 6 seconds isn't even enough time to do anything. What about this is nuts.
But meanwhile, of course, our friend Allison has sprung into action, and she grabs Marty by the arm, and they run, and apparently there's a window in this underground 66th below ground floor apartment, and they dive through it. And that's the big like dramatic scene to end issue 4, is them like busting glass through this window like out of a great action movie. So as we open issue 5, Bernice and Veronica have been traveling toward the headquarters of the church this whole time. And there's a lot of great dialogue scenes that are just sort of interspersed throughout the action that we've described so far. And the conversation between these two is really very funny. Veronica is talking about how she didn't really realize what she was getting into when she signed this, $600,000 a year plus contract. And she was like, I went through like a punk phase.
It was just one of the phases to piss off my parents, basically.
Exactly. Right. But so where they are now at the beginning, issue 5, they stop to get something to eat at this burger lord that's way out in the desert. I don't guess we have a lot of deserts around Jonesboro, Arkansas, but they do in this book. And they look up in the distance and they see smoke rising up over the hills from where that church headquarters should be. And they realize, like, we're probably too late. Whatever was going to happen, that we were going to try and save Marty and Allison, has already occurred.
Yeah.
But Allison and Marty escape from, as it turns out, when you dive out the window of the 66th floor below ground apartment, you end up in like a hell-like place.
Right.
And so they escape from there, though. Mostly, of course, through Allison's wit and cunning. And they hotwire a car because Allison knows how to do that, and they make their way away. And what's so funny, too, is Marty, at one point, like, he's so scared, and I guess he gets knocked unconscious or something when they dive out the window. And he wakes himself up, and he's doing the thing that he does to soothe himself, which is just reciting all the menu items at Burger Lord. And at some point, Allison sort of joins in, like, singing along. Do you remember, this would have been in the late 80s, I think.
Are you going to talk about the jingle?
The McDonald's song?
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about
Two all-beef
that.
patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese. That one?
Yeah.
Pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun.
Yes.
Yeah, everybody knows that one. But that's exactly what it was like. She starts singing that part, describing that menu item.
That's right. So there was this time when, and for our younger listeners out there, which is probably most of you, there was this period, I think it was in the late 80s, where McDonald's had this jingle where it was a song, and they listed
it's
every
the Big
menu
Mac,
item.
right? And I think they're just describing the Big Mac. If you listen to the items, that's what is the special sauce.
Oh, okay. So they had that
on
but
the Big Mac.
There was a different one though, where they listed all the menu items. Where it was like Big Mac McBLT, quarter pounder with some cheese, big breakfast, McDonald's tasty golden fries, regular and larger sizes.
I'm impressed. I don't remember that one. I just remember the Big Mac song.
As a kid, I tried to commit it to memory, but I think it was like a promotion they were doing for a while, where if you could go in and like sing the whole song, maybe you got a small fry or something. I don't remember the details, but okay. So just when for Bernice and Veronica, it seems like all hope is lost, here come Allison and Marty. And, they're singed. They smell like sulfur. They're a little bedraggled, I suppose, but they're alive. And there is this awesome page where Bernice just runs to Marty and picks him up in a bear hug and lifts him up off the ground. And it's a splash page. So it's the only panel on the whole page. And it's Bernice, and she's got the biggest smile on her face. And she's so happy to see this doofus alive again, And it is awesome. And then he says to Bernice, that's Allison. I hired her. We have to discuss a start date. So I guess the interview portion is over at this point. But we're out here in the desert, and there's all this open land, and there's not too much else going on except like a car of a couple of annoying customers who had gone through the burger lord that was nearby. And like, these are characters we'd not seen before, and they just show up, and you're like, what are they here for? Well, meanwhile, we learn it's because this giant Satan figure is running through the desert, and he's yelling, "The great deceiver leaves nothing behind but emptiness," and he just like smashes this car.
But weren't they were kind of rude, I think, to the guy that was working at this particular burger lord.
That's right.
While
They were
Veronica
rude.
and Bernice were there.
Yes.
They were just really rude about the order. So it's like one of those classic things you'd see where the dinosaur or whatever kind of creature
Right.
in whatever sci-fi movie kills this annoying character. The attorney in Jurassic Park.
Yes.
You know.
Well, and immediately before getting their car stepped on by this giant satanic hoof, they had just thrown their litter out the window.
That's
too.
right.
So Marty and Bernice and Veronica and Allison all go inside this Burger Lord restaurant, and fortunately they were able to get the discount from the other franchise. And so they're sitting there and they're having a Burger Lord meal, kind of breaking down what exactly has happened here and, trying to make some sense of this. Meanwhile, out of nowhere, you see Lonnie and Johnny walking up, except there's like this red haze all around them and almost like fire or sulfur or something like that is coming off of them. And they realize it's Lonnie and Johnny in their demon form. But we had learned throughout the book that for as mean as they can be to all their workers, they have this soft spot for Bernice.
They do.
Where she can just be like, I'm leaving early today. And they're like, oh, okay, we'll stay and clean up the restaurant, you know?
But, that's one of the things I made notes about. I talked about these different characters and how I just kind of relate to people I've worked with, or like qualities I look for at people that work where I work. And there are people that just show up, do their job. You don't even see them throughout the day, right? They don't cause any drama. They smile at you when you walk into the restroom if you pass them. And then they go home. And I think like those kind of people, I would tolerate a lot more from somebody that just shows up, does their work, goes home, never causes any drama. I kind of feel like that's Lonnie and Johnny's attitude toward. That's why they let her get away with stuff.
Sure, she's
They're
running
like,
a good
she
restaurant.
never causes a problem.
Yep.
She takes care of the place. So yeah, if she needs a little extra leeway here to leave early for whatever reason, they let her do it.
Go see a Queensryche concert.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so as they are approaching in their demon form, she is able to like calm them down and say like, well, really, it was Marty and Allison who saved the day. And this is our new employee, Allison. We've hired her. And they like calm back into their human form immediately, which is so funny because the way they talk, they're ready to blame anything that's bad that's happened on Marty because they just know that's who he is. Which is so funny.
They call him a certain word I don't want to repeat on this podcast.
We're keeping our clean rating here. Yeah.
But we'll just say F-face is what they call him, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But while they're standing out here outside of this Burger Lord restaurant, that devil figure kind of comes running through again. And you can think of him at this point as he's just like running around wild, like I'm going to do a rampage or whatever. And he yells like, the god of the underworld craves death, destruction, havoc, plague. More to kill in the distance. And then he kind of stops and he goes, huh? And he looks down and he sees all these people right there. And he thinks like it's going to be time for him to kill them.
Yeah, he's getting ready to take out the whole crew and the Burger Lord, everyone. But Allison is going on she's doing one of her speeches and she's going on and on about, I hope I've done enough to prove myself to Marty during this whole interview again. She thinks the interview is still going on. Right. I have to say, this is the strangest interview I've ever gone on. I feel like it's gone really well, but you know how it is. The second you have a chance to stop and think about it, you remember everything you said wrong or forgot to say, and you feel like you need a second. Go to try and correct all the errors, clarify the vagaries. She's just going on and on. Right. And then the next panel, the Satan in his gigantic form, ready to kill everyone, says, ugh, that girl and the guy with the mustache, I'll come back for them later. I don't have the energy. And I'm like, it takes me right back to the first thought I had about Allison at the very beginning, which was, oh my God, when she gets thrown in the back of the van and they're kidnapped, I'm thinking, could there be a worse person to be kidnapped and stuck in the back of a van with than this girl?
Well, what's funny too is right when they first get thrown in the van, Marty is trying to do the like CIA thing where he's like, okay, we've gone 2 blocks and we've hit a bump. That means we must be on 3rd Street.
I hear such and such in the background. That must be.
And he's trying to concentrate. And meanwhile, Allison the whole time is just like,
this is how I empty the grease filter. And this is how
That's right. And so the devil at the end of this is like, I'm just going to run off into the wilderness and
come back later.
Worry about them.
I just can't.
It's so awesome. And so we wrap up our book with Veronica going outside and getting on her cell phone, and she's going to call her mom and try and make recompense and see if she can come home. And everybody else is just like at their own Jonesboro Burger Lord restaurant again. And Marty realizes that maybe he's not the great criminal mastermind he wanted to be, but you know what? He's okay with who he is. He's got people who love him. He's got a job that's steady and stable, and he's going to be okay. And at one point, he's like, I mean, I guess the Satan is loose on the world. That's probably bad. But we never get any more on that.
Yep.
Oh, my gosh. Crump, I had so much fun reading this book and talking about it.
Absolutely. You know, for me, having had a 40-year sort of in-between time in reading something like this, and obviously a little different than what I did, I could definitely see myself reading more of these. Not only that, but it's more fun. I have a hard time reading like a regular book unless I'm usually listening to a podcast or an audiobook because I drive about 100 miles a day back and forth, 50 each way.
To Humano?
Yeah, from Little Rock in, and I can actually get through these, whereas a really, really long, nothing but print, that wears me out. But this was such a fun read. And I tell you, I mean, those characters, the way Marty's character, I never worked fast food, but I worked at a warehouse for 5 years. I was never officially like an assistant manager or anything like that. But I was the guy that I would close and I would lock up and I would clean up. And I was working, when they needed things done, I was that guy because, I was there 5 years while I was finishing up school. And I think I was making, at the end, maybe $7 an hour.
Yeah.
But at the same time, somehow paying my bills and having some of the best times of my life were when I was making $7 an hour.
Sure.
In a job a lot like what Marty was doing. So, I mean, the characters, they just have a lot of value, I thought,
100%. 100%.
Very well developed.
This was so fun.
Yeah, it was.
So fun. So thank you to Scott, Bryan Wilson, and Liana Kangas and the creative team behind this book for putting together such a fun project. And Crump, thank you for coming here and talking through this book with me today. We're recording this on Sunday. It's a weekend, and you made the drive all the way back into Central Arkansas from your home. So, man, I appreciate that you would do that.
It was great. I appreciate the opportunity.
And, dude, I guess we've known each other, 22, 23 years, something like that now. And I'm looking forward to
That's been the
more
fun
years.
of this listening to your podcast, Mark. As you're going through it, I really didn't realize Mark has a lot of these friends. I didn't realize you had so many friends.
You thought it was just you.
I thought me, Jake, and maybe Parrish. I didn't know if there was any others out there, but it's been great fun.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, before we go, we should mention this. You and I first came to know each other through a guy that I should have talked about when I had Jake Jones on the podcast, because this guy, Brad Newman, who is a mutual friend of both of ours, is sort of a bringer together of people.
That's what he does.
Nothing he likes better than to eat lunch.
A good lunch.
And to eat lunch with people he likes.
Yep.
And you and I have both been part of the Brad Newman lunch crew at various points throughout the years, which is a crew that, you sort of sign up for the 666 year servitude.
You're right.
In that you would never escape that lunch crew, even if you wanted to. But it's how you and I got to know each other. And actually, all this talk about music, I think the thing that really bonded us is I remember this now. The first time, this was probably the summer of 2003. I was clerking at the Attorney General's office.
The Dixie Pig?
And we were at the Dixie Pig.
Yeah.
And you and I bonded over Bob Schneider.
Bob Schneider, yeah.
And
Who my
his
brother
music.
introduced me to. Yeah.
He had just come and played at what's now called Sticky's, but it was called Sticky Fingers at the time, down in the River Market area in Little Rock, and it just blown me away. His music was awesome.
And you mentioned Brad Newman. I guess you and I, we kind of are in a cult. I mean, you might not have ever realized it, but
if I didn't try to put the title of the book in the podcast episode so people could find it every time, I think The Cult of Newman would have been
I think that'd be a perfect title.
Would have been a nice title for this episode. All right. So a week from now, if you want to hear it, and I hope you will, I'll release just a bonus episode, I guess we'll call it, where Crump and I have talked through our top 20 albums that ended up getting cut out of this episode because it was like an hour long and probably didn't need that. And 2 weeks from now, we'll be back with Batman The Long Halloween, issue number 2, as we continue on our Long Halloween series with our Thanksgiving November issue. And until then, keep reading those comics.